Hello and welcome to another edition of #DigLead Book Club, a live stream series where I am featuring leaders who I got to gush about in my new book, Digital Leadership in Higher Education. And what I especially found through my research and the intention of the book was not just to give recipes or roadmaps, but real people that are doing the good work. We know within social media and digital communications, there's also not just one way to show up and make an impact online. And so that is why I include so many interesting stories and heart-filled people in the book, as well as in this live streamed series. And that is also why we are streaming live in all kinds of different digital places today, from Twitter and LinkedIn, Facebook, and YouTube. And so I would love to know who is joining us today. I'm coming into you from Los Angeles, California, where our weather is a little confused. It racked in at 90 degrees yesterday. But again, I'm from Wyoming, so that's why we start out talking about the weather. Okay, that's just a nice little icebreaker right now. So wherever you are tuning in from, whether you're joining us live or watching the replay and recording, I just want to welcome you. And of course, I would also love to know if you have been able to pick up your copy of the book. As I say in all of these, this is not an infomercial that you are going to be sold the book. If anything, it's going to give you some cliff notes and some highlights of the people featured and the actual enactment of leadership in digital spaces. So without any further ado, I am very excited to bring on my next guest, who is Patti Pirillo. She is the Vice President for Student Affairs at University of Maryland, and recently has had that transition during this roller coaster ride of COVID. So we're going to get talking about that, as well as the ways that she shows up with heart, soul, and substance on all types of platforms. So let me welcome in Patti.
Hello, Josie. Hello, everybody. It's good to be in community with you, and thanks for the invitation, Josie.
Wonderful. And we may, as Patti shared before we went live, we might get a sunset behind those windows. So I will stay focused on our conversation, but we might have a dramatic unfolding as we get to chat. So that is pretty neat. Well, Patti, thank you so much for jumping on. I'll just take about any excuse I can to get to connect and chat with you, as well as feature you, because we haven't gotten to chat since your big transition. So in the spring, you moved from Virginia Tech to University of Maryland. And I read an article that said on your third day, you were just given this small task of leading the university response to this mysterious disease that we know now very clearly is COVID-19. So welcome. And let me just hit you with a really difficult question right away. What was that transition like? Because I also learned you have a PhD in public health and community, which I would foresee was such an advantage during this time. I would love to hear how that's informed your decision in community building.
So, Josie, I will respond to that, but I have to begin by saying I did see something that you posted where your hometown was so proud of you that they posted, I think it was on the front page of their newspaper, that you had written and published this book. And I just thought it was just powerful and sweet and heartwarming. So I can only imagine, you talk about coming from your home, you talk about your family and your home quite a bit. And the fact that they kind of wrapped their arms around you with such pride was really, really sweet. And so I just wanted to say congratulations.
Oh, thank you. Well, of course, my mom, the kindergarten teacher, cut out the clippings and mailed it to me. And so that was what the photo was of. It was the clippings for my good old scrapbook.
Good job, Mom, right? Good job, Mom. That is just great. That is just great. So you're right. I started here officially on January 21st. and on January 24th, the director of our University Health Center, who I've actually known for 25 years. When I was here at Maryland getting my PhD, and actually I did this really interesting PhD then. My master's was in student affairs, but I really wanted to have an interdisciplinary approach to my graduate education, long before higher education was talking about interdisciplinary approaches, right? I always knew that I would be caring about the health and well-being of a community in whatever way I was leading and wherever I was. So I really wanted to understand the relationship between public and community health and student affairs and higher education. So I really did this interdisciplinary approach, and faculty members in student affairs were on my dissertation committee, and my dissertation focused on kind of a health issue for college students. And so it's this really interesting approach that very much has informed my work over the last 25, 30 years. And so I was here in the 90s. I worked in the health center as a health educator, amongst other things. I then worked in residence life, and I worked in athletics, as many of us in grad school do, right? And so I came back here, and Dr. Bodison, the current director of our health center, who I know and I've known for a long time, called me out and said on day 3. So I started on January 21st, and on January 24th, she said, the infectious disease committee has been meeting, and we think it's time for the incident response team to meet. And I said, Dr. Bodison, you just let me know where to go. I will sit right next to you. And she said, oh, you chair that committee. I was like, oh my gosh, here we go. And so I stepped right in. You know, you've heard the expression, as I have many times before, baptism by fire. Whew, this gave it a new meaning. That is for sure.
Wow. And also quite full circle, and for you coming home, both from your early days in your career, but also with your PhD. Like, who knew many moons later we would be where we are today? So
That's a beautiful thing about life, right? We just don't know. We just
right.
don't know. It is a wonderful, I actually think it's one of the things that I love about our profession too. I came back here to a place where there were many people like Dr. Bodison. Like, I came back to a division and a team of colleagues, many who I've known for 25 years. And because of social media, I've been able to stay connected to them, and I've watched their children grow up, right? I watched them get married or lose a parent or whatever it is, because social media has helped us stay connected, which has been something really important for me as I talk about social media. That has been a real gift to me, to sustain some relationships that would have been harder to sustain simply because I'm able to connect in those ways.
Right. Such a tool.
Yeah.
Well, scrolling back the clock a little bit before we really dig into social media. 20 years ago, this was me looking you up on LinkedIn. You started your first AVP position, so kind of that leadership track. 20 years later, here we are, second VPSA, and in the middle of a pandemic. As you look to the next 20 years, whether you're retired or not, but what could you already foresee, looking back and seeing where we are, what we might project as we're starting to look into the future, based upon the longevity and just perspective you've had over this last year?
That's such an interesting question, Josie, because it's, and I wonder what it's like for you, because I want to ask you this question too, okay? Because I think that's really important too. I'm, as you know, on a college campus, and it's been a coming home, and it's been lovely and fascinating all at the same time. So in my 30 years of professional work, and I think that most of us would say it, most of us who are working on college campuses, none of us has ever done this before. The leadership and management and partnership around a COVID response on a college campus. It is an enterprise unto itself. It is like nothing that I've ever dealt with before, and none of us has ever done before, right? But we've had such powerful and wonderful and solid training that all of us in student affairs are positioned to really help lead campuses during these times. Even though there's not a blueprint for any of us, we've got the strong kind of footholdings and foundation to do that really well. But it's the kind of work that keeps you in the present moment at all times. I can guarantee you that anybody that's working in student affairs is constantly looking at the number of positive cases, the number of students living in quarantine and isolation housing, what's happening in our counties, what's happening nationally. So much of our work has been focused on this ever-present moment and managing it as best we can. And so you're asking a question about 20 years out, right? And for many of us, we're just trying to figure out, can we get to Thanksgiving? Can we get to Thanksgiving and hold our communities intact and in place? But I really appreciate that question, because I think that one of the most important things that we have to do as leaders is to create a sense of hope and possibility of what will be. And so all along, as I've been managing with lots and lots of people, as I've been helping to lead efforts around COVID, I've been wanting to partner with it, the sense of hope and possibility, and doing the work of, reimagining our mission, our vision, and our values, really claiming our learning outcomes, like doing this work alongside. But you have to be careful, because you want to make sure that people have just enough space to manage all that they need to manage in their life, right? So your question is a really good one, because I have said many times that if we are not thinking about the future of higher education now, in this moment in time, we're never going to think about it deeply. I mean, it has to change us. I mean, right? We as human beings are living through this. This hasn't happened, for 100 years, right? And we're living through this, and it has to change us in some ways. And so I think your question's a real good one. And you know this because you've worked on college campuses before, that even when you worked on a college campus, I can guarantee that you all were talking about how might we be different? How might our student affairs division change form? How do we become a division in the 21st century, right? And in spite of all those conversations across the country, 30 years in this profession, and I would say that most of us are set up and organized in very similar ways, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think COVID's going to change that. I think COVID is going to force us as kind of a higher ed enterprise to really rethink our work.
Right.
And so I'll speak a little bit about some of the things I'm thinking about in 20 years, but I want to ask you this question. When you think about the space that you're in and your expertise and your scholarship and the work that you're doing, what do you forecast in the next 20 years?
Well, I think your nudge of how do we just get through 2 weeks is very valid, right? And that is a real task and ask, of which we never would have imagined a year ago if you and I were chatting. I mean, the example of you taking on the university response, and sometimes in some organizations, we slow things down through committee work, and not and we just all we got to check in again. And so the ability to be nimble and to innovate and even to respond in crisis. We've had crises going on our campuses for decades that we've known of, but not at this scale, right? Or not at this substance. I think, and there's been similarities between those. So I think it's forcing leaders to sharpen their skills of agility, whereas I think we would have wanted a more steady drumbeat. I mean, I think ethical character and leadership is being tested, and it's come out actually in these interviews, which is so interesting. And I guess reading the book, it also comes out like a through line of the people I featured. I think the way they show up on social, we use the word leadership, but I do think there is this strong moral character in addition to having y'all have purpose about why you're online, and that's for the people that you serve. So I think staying so grounded in that, whether it's to get you to Thanksgiving or in 20 years. And I think that a lot of that goes back to willingness to change. So honestly, like if I had a wish list, it's like, well, we don't have to even still document that it's a good thing to have a vice president using a tool like Twitter. Because actually that's a pretty, not simple, but starter platform, right? Versus a lot of other methods of access and engagement. And this isn't about me. I'm going to get off my soapbox. But I appreciate you turning the tables.
I love that, because I do think it is about access. And I think that's really important. I think that it is a value of mine, and access is a value of yours. And I think access is a value of so many of us in student affairs. And the truth of the matter is, for a long time, those who have access to vice presidents for student affairs or senior leaders or other leaders are those students who are involved or who are engaged, right? And one of the silver linings, I think, in this pandemic is that I have had so many students who are commuter students who live pretty far away that actually are saying, I'm more engaged now because they're holding meetings virtually, because I can access those meetings. In the past, I would have to come home for a part-time job or come home to care for my family. But now I can call in and participate. And I think that that's one of the things that will change when we go back to a time when we are physically together, and that's going to happen much later than any of us would have ever imagined or wanted, but it will happen. We are going to have to rethink how it is that we do everything,
Right.
because this virtual space has created an opportunity for accessibility in ways that nothing else has done before. And so I think that's one of the things in 20 years that's going to be fundamentally different. That we are going to be thinking about all of our programs and resources and services, both in the physical space as well as in a virtual space, whatever that virtual space might look like in 20 years. But I think we're going to be thinking about that. I don't believe for a moment that the physical based campus, the residential education, is a strategic advantage for higher education. There's no doubt about that. And so I think that will happen. That will remain. There's no doubt about it. But to think about how it is that we might strengthen our virtual and digital offerings will be really important. And so Twitter has been a way for me to be accessible to students that I don't get to spend time with in a daily or a weekly way, which has been really, really helpful for me. There's no doubt about it. The other thing I just want to make sure I don't forget to mention, because you asked the question, in 20 years, how might higher education change? I spend a lot of time on my campus, and I'm sure many, many leaders do, is that I talk about, I believe we're in a kind of a triple pandemic. It's the pandemic of health because of COVID. It's the pandemic of social injustice, although it's been going on for hundreds of years, but we have elevated it in this moment in time. And the disparities are being revealed even more so in a COVID environment. And the third is the economic pandemic, the impact financially. So in 20 years, the ways in which we have been leading and talking about on college campuses around issues of diversity, equity, and inclusion, I believe will be fundamentally different because of this moment in time.
Mm.
It's helping us see it in ways that I think that we've never seen it before, in glaring ways, even on our own campus. And so I think that will be a significant shift for us in 20 years.
Right. Awesome. Well, I love that example of connecting with a commuter student who normally wouldn't have access, and having just that small engagement point on Twitter, which I think is a great Kickstarter to leaning in a bit about the book and how you were featured. You got to get digging into the book. Patti has mentioned, I think like in chapter 6 or 7, where we talk about branding, and branding gets a bad rap. And so we can use any other word you want, that I'm not talking to you, Patti, but just like those that are listening, about like, well, what are your choices of like how you want to show up? What's the impression that you want to make? And some folks really lean to the notion of authenticity. I've heard you use different value-based words, even in how you describe being able to communicate to your staff the idea of hope. So there's so many elements out there. And what I love about using like Twitter bios is it's kind of your welcome mat. You can let people know right away, like, this is who I am. And yours says, Vice President for Student Affairs, University of Maryland. I care about our students, faculty, and staff. Love our university motto, strong deeds, gentle words. I would love to hear kind of your choice of declaring and using that as potentially a stepping off point to maybe have some of those moments with a commuter student or anyone else you'd want to connect with on Twitter that connects back to who you are and your values.
Sure. And Josie, I do want to thank you. I've said this to you before directly and certainly in emails, but I just want to publicly thank you for the work that you did with me as a partner in my thinking about stepping into this work more deeply. I never imagined that it would become a part of your book. And I appreciate that you even thought about doing that. But I don't know if your listeners know, or those who purchase your book know, that you also will engage with folks in a one-on-one capacity as kind of a coach or a mentor or a guide. And that was really important for me, really, really important for me. You helped me think about things in some really interesting, innovative, neat ways. Some things that I still haven't stepped into, but I haven't forgotten yet. I mean, I learned a lot. I actually wanted to step into it more, but these days there's so much time focused on the day to day that it's hard to bring. But I will continue to bring those things and those lessons that you taught me into these conversations. And I say conversations because I see Twitter even as a conversation, right? It's a way to be in conversation with, and that's how I think about social media. It's a way to engage. It's a way to be in conversation with. It's a way to represent the word I chose was care. I feel really strongly, very, very strongly, that young people on college campuses, no matter what the age, well, first of all, it's a human need, but I think it's particularly important for young people to feel a sense of care, right? What we know about our college students is that they are coming to campus lonelier than generations before them, right? They are coming to campus with a greater sense of anxiety, more depression, greater sense of loneliness. And now in this COVID environment on our campus, we're saying you can come back, but everybody has to be in singles. You can come back, but you've got to be 6 feet apart from each other. You can come back, but there's limited engagement in terms of activities. And they're already feeling really lonely, right? Mm-hmm. And so the ethic of care, students need to know that there are people on their campuses that care about them. And that's a really important message for me that I'm constantly delivering in every message I send, whether it's Instagram or Facebook or Twitter. I'm constantly trying to envelop the message in an ethic of care because I think it creates a holding space for young people. And in that holding space, either when you're with me in my presence or with me virtually, that in that holding space of caring, I think the best of us comes out. And so in that bio in my Twitter, I specifically chose the word I care about because that's what I want to convey more than anything.
Mm-hmm. And it's meaningful, even when for you, so you feel connected to when you go to your platform, that it doesn't feel like just messaging and information, even though I know we have so much to get out there, but it's one sliver of humanizing to humans. And I don't know if that's really been articulated to campus leadership as a tactic. And again, maybe coming from your back, like most of the time I hear a lot of words like it's personal, it's professional, we separate, it's boundaries. It's a bit more of a risk, negotiating risk, right? And there is risk in it, right? To show up in digital spaces. But anyway, I appreciate how you can start with the value and not the fear and not the problem. Because I think you can do both.
I agree with you. I absolutely agree with you. I actually think I've always believed this, that we take ourselves wherever we go. Like wherever we go. When you come into a physical space, let's just you walk into the office and that day you're struggling because there's some family stuff at home. It doesn't leave you at the door. Like you carry it with you, right? We are in the business of developing whole human beings. But then we ask us as professionals not to be whole human beings. Separate your personal from your professional, right? And for many of us, the professional is personal because it's a vocation. Like I know that to be true for me. This is not a job. It is a vocation. This is what I'm called to do. And to ask me to leave myself out of that equation just doesn't feel integrative. It doesn't feel congruent. It doesn't feel whole. And I actually think the scholarship of our profession asks us to create wholeness. So it's really interesting, right? It's very, very interesting that but even though I know that, it was you who helped me get beyond. I think I had this kind of block, if you will. And Josie, I don't know if you remember these conversations that we had pretty early on when I was stepping into this. I was thinking, who wants to hear my tweets? I mean, I don't mean that in a self-deprecating way, because I have a lot of faith in myself as a human and a leader. But I was like, who wants to hear like my tweets? Like, what am I going to say that's going to make a difference or interesting? You were the one that helped me understand that it was a way to show my leadership in a broader sense. It was a way for me to claim my values, my brand, the messages that I want to deliver in a virtual way. And when I thought about that, I was like, okay, that makes sense. All it is that I'm leading. I'm just leading in a virtual environment. And it was, so for anyone that's listening right now, if you've got this block and feel like you don't have much to say or much to share, this can become a really powerful forum for you to lead and elevate your message and amplify your message as a way to help shape community, which I think is really, really helpful.
Well, some of my favorite people to work with are very hardworking, but are also humble. I would much prefer that it's about those that we serve, right? I don't want to draw the attention to me, which is why it could feel misaligned or not in your gut, not feel right to be speaking about yourself or sharing. And so I appreciate hearing that reflection. And I think this example that I pulled up is such a neat example of that. And so when I saw it, I was like, yes, I see you posting. It's basically digital storytelling. So you posted, this was back in August. And obviously East Coast, much different than out here in LA where we are fully remote. No one's not even going to campuses, but y'all have had different hybrid models. So you had an early meeting with your housekeeping staff in Maryland, and you wrote this really, just like caring and reflective post about your own experience as a college student, as a first-gen student, and the impact a housekeeper made on you. Because one thing I challenge leaders to think about is like, well, what were you like as a college student or as a kid, or and how those roles inform your work, both in telling those stories, but also connecting some of those dots. So I would love maybe share that story a little bit. So especially probably people haven't seen the post, but yeah, how a little bit the roles that you have in your life also inform how you show up on social media.
Absolutely. Josie, this goes back a little bit to what I was saying earlier, too, about the social disparities that COVID is revealing, I think in ways that many of us have always known, but there's no way not to know it now. And I can bet that maybe not, but even in schools in California that are virtual, you still have some folks who are coming in that are paying attention to the buildings because you have to take care of them, right? And so what we are experiencing, many of us who are in a hybrid model, is that we're saying to some, for those of you that can telework, go ahead and telework. But there's a whole group of people that can't telework, and they are our housekeepers, and they are our dining staff, and they are our facilities team. And they're the ones who are coming in every day, caring for community. And because the financial impact of COVID in such negative ways, they likely will be the first who are asked to leave. And so the social disparities are just incredible. So every year, not even in COVID year, but every year since I've been a vice president, or not even a vice president, just a leader on my campus, I've always connected to our facilities and housekeeping staff and our dining staff too. I actually, at some point in time, I think a month ago, I posted about our dining staff. And so I know that they are really important leaders on our campus. I know that for a whole host of reasons, because I've worked in this profession for 30 years. I don't know if others have read Peter McGoldrick's book on the lives of custodians. So he did an ethnographic study of custodial life and talked about the kind of class system and the caste system that we have on college campuses. And I often have my senior leadership team read those books. So I know about it from the scholarship. I know about it from my work, but I also know it personally because as an undergraduate at the University of Delaware, which was 20 minutes away from my house, I'm a first generation college student. I often say this to folks. I'm one of 8 children. Kid number 5, my parents' favorite. I'm the youngest of 15, and I have 80 first cousins. And I was really one of the first to go to college in that whole Perillo family. And I struggled mightily. I was really, really homesick, like profoundly homesick. And the housekeeper on my floor noticed it. And she saw me. In those days, we had pay phones in the hall. And she saw me lined up. I was always lined up, getting on that phone, constantly getting off the phone crying because I had to hang up to let the next person talk. And she kind of took me under her wing. She invited me to have lunch with her. She introduced me to other housekeepers. She actually brought me to her family's home that was close in the area. And it was her care that helped sustain me. And so I always want to pay it forward because I know they're not just housekeepers. They are community builders. Many of our housekeepers know more about students on those residence hall floors than anybody in that building, right? They pay attention, right? They care for. And so it was a way to acknowledge publicly their work, their contributions, and who they are. So the fact that you saw that makes me happy, because they deserve that kind of honoring and that kind of respect, and that kind of place on our campus.
Right. Yeah. Well, and the word care keeps coming up in our conversation. Again, a value of yours, but also as we look at what our roles are now and going forward, and not just even those obvious that we should care for. Which I guess I can't help but maybe take a pause to talk about the care for ourselves. I have seen you offer some posts of you and your partner. I can only imagine the tax of a position like this, and the constant strain of different scenarios that you were faced every single day, without, like throwing out emojis and rainbows, like, because this is really hard. What's actually been realistic for you to take care of yourself that others might learn from?
So I'm really glad you asked this question. Just really, really glad, because it is so important. And again, even in non-COVID times, it's really important, right? I think that we do tend to be a profession of people that tend to be high achieving. We want to make a difference. We care about others. And sometimes we can do that at a cost to ourselves. And so I think that even beyond COVID times, that this is a message that I was bringing before and I will continue to bring after, but certainly now. And I think in some ways it's as important now as ever, right? Because what I do know, and this is part of my health background, is that if any of us does get COVID, that one of the best ways to kind of fight it off is to have strong immunity systems, right? Like that is one of the most important things that we can do. And so I have weekly newsletters or emails or videos. It depends on the week and kind of what the spirit moves me, whether it's a video for me or an email for me, or I send something out to my division just to stay in constant communication and contact, because these are complex and I think really fear-filled times for lots of people. And I think staying in conversation and connection is really important. I also have monthly town halls for my division. And whether it's the town halls, whether it's my tweets, whether it's the written word, my team is going to hear me constantly remind them, take care of yourself, find ways to take care of yourself. And interestingly, in a recent town hall, in a Q&A session, somebody said, we continue to hear you talk about the take care of ourselves, and the demand for the work just continues to get greater and greater and greater and greater. And I said, yep, both of those things are true. Like both of those things are true, right? So even if it's just in a day where you spend 10 minutes in meditation, or even it's just in a day you decide to take a 10-minute walk in nature, or if it's that you commit to getting 7 to 8 hours of sleep. And so for myself, what I do know is that I have, for the last 9 months, in the middle of even a presidential transition, because I got a new president in July. So in the middle of a presidential, and I'm still living in, we haven't bought our home yet. We sold our homes, and now we're in a, apartment, 2-bedroom apartment. All of our stuff's in storage. So it's just been a fascinating time, like in my life. There's no doubt about that. And I've committed to getting 7 to 8 hours of sleep a night. I meditate every day. I take 45 minutes to an hour walk every day. I eat, I'm vegetarian, but I eat fruits and vegetables all the time. So I'm finding ways to take care of myself, because what I know is that I want to stay in this caring for community position. And if I get sick, I'm out for 14 days, or I'm out for 21 days, or I'm out. And I don't want that to happen. I mean, the university will go on without me. I'm really clear about that. That's true for all of us, right? But I actually have found a deep sense of purpose in this moment in time, where I feel like I'm deeply invested for caring for community. When I talk with my sisters, and I do that regularly, they talk a lot about how they have jobs and they like their jobs, but their jobs are parts of corporations or businesses. When I talk about my job, it's about caring for people, caring for community, making a difference in people's lives, right? And so I will continue to remind my folks. We have a town hall this week, this Thursday, and part of the town hall is going to be a 15-minute meditation practice. And the town hall is going to be our colleagues in recreation and wellness who are teaching us about what exercises can you do, because most of us are sitting in chairs the whole time. So what are the exercises you can do while you're sitting in a chair, or you can stand up in a chair? So I'm trying to build it in not just in words, but in practice too, very tangible ways. Our last town hall, I had one of our colleagues who's the psychiatrist at the health center who specializes in burnout talk about what burnout is, and it's a real phenomenon, and how do you notice signs of it, and what are some things that you can do to avoid it. And so I will continue to build in, not just again in my words, but in my practice, those kinds of things, because it's just really important. It's just very, very important.
Well,
how are you taking care of yourself?
Well, sometimes one has to use oneself to tell the story of what not to do in order for our own change, but for lessons for others. So and this is just also just so on brand for me, like once we went into quarantine, didn't have access to gyms and yoga and all those things. So I was running as I wanted to stay healthy, right? So I'm running a lot and doing YouTube videos that I had no business doing. And I was sitting a lot. Also, probably like working in places that I normally wouldn't, like a couch that doesn't have right support. And so the end of May, the same day George Floyd was killed, and I'm not making that correlation at all, but I threw out my back and was bedridden for a week. And it took me until recently to heal. And instead of like going on a long bike ride, I'd have to go on a long walk. Like it was also like an ego shift of having to slow down. So talking about pacing and burnout, in my health, I almost went to like two extremes, right? But I'm definitely back on track and healthy, and so grateful too. I don't think I've had a injury like that it wasn't as if I needed surgery, thankfully, but it was chronic pain that I hadn't experienced before. In addition to just the pain of the world, it was a wild, interesting experience. But I appreciate your examples of like 10 minutes, little things here and there that can add up. Because I think before we thought, like myself, oh, I have to go on these long runs, or I have to do meditation every single day, or I'm not doing it right. That the little things can actually make, or even just the chair you're sitting in. I had to buy all these contraptions around me because every time you sit, or the way that I would maybe bend over to feed my dog was aggravating it. It like chips away. So how do you build the chips back up too? So
Rosie, I'm glad you named that too, because I myself, it happened in May. I don't know the right time, but there's definitely been some kind of hip back stuff that I've been working on since then, and I'm still in process of working on seeing our trainers, seeing a chiropractor, a bunch of physical therapy. And again, I think part of it is I really do believe that our bodies keep the score emotionally, physically, and spiritually. And I'm not even surprised that on the day of George Floyd's murder, that you maybe, and again, I don't want to sidearm psychology anybody, but it could have been that the pain of it was so great that you even felt it in your body, right? It just created a shift. And I do think that all that we are carrying for 10 months is not something that we are used to as human beings. Right. All of us go through, hills and valleys in our lifetime. There's no doubt about it. But this sustained human collective pain and struggle is just so much. I was on a call with my sisters. We have these weekly phone calls. They're my posse, I call them, right? My sisters. And my younger sister, was weeping because she said, I've never had holidays without you. And we're talking about, do we get together we celebrate Christmas. Like, do we get together for Christmas or not? And is it safe or not safe? And how could we not do it? And, that's just a small example. And again, we're privileged enough to even have the conversation about, Christmas. But I do think that all of us are carrying so much at so many levels of our human experience and our developmental experience that we have to find those ways to create connections with others, to read, to just binge watch on something just to escape, to take a walk. Like we just have to find those ways. I just think it's really, really important.
Hmm.
Start where you are. That's the thing, right? That's just to start where you are, not to
Yeah.
feel like you gotta climb the mountain, but it's the one step at a time that really does make a difference.
Right. I mean, like you had noted, there's a lot of fear right now from our own health, our family's health, but also, I don't know how large your division is offhand, how many human bodies are in your care, but there's also fear for the future. Are our institutions secure? Are our positions secure? So that is also a weight to bear as well. And at least from my observations, where I'm finding people are appreciating is a leader that can state the obvious. This is hard. That can state, I care about you. At the same time, yes, there's a lot of work we have to do right now. So it's not sugarcoating it. There's this reality, and here's some resources. But I would still assume as a leader, that's a lot of weight to bear to be able to sleep at night between you and your colleagues. So I'm thrilled to hear you've got some self-care practices that you're putting in, but I don't know if you have any other reflections for leaders listening or those that might need to hear some of that assurance right
Thank
now.
you, Rosie. It's so interesting. One of the things that I do again as a way to build community and to create connections in this ethic of care is that I spend time with. There are 14 departments in the Division of Student Affairs, and there are about 3,000 students and staff that work in the Division of Student Affairs. And I want to get to know people. I really want to get to know. And one of the things about Zoom, right, is that you actually can see the person and see their name, so you're able to make these connections, right? So today I met with my Career Center team, and I asked a series of questions and spent some time with Q&A, but one of the questions that I asked them is that over the last 10 months, you've heard lots of messages, whether it's through the town halls, whether it's through Q&A, whether it's in departmental meetings, whether it's in my communications, whether it's on social media. There's a narrative that's being told about our Division of Student Affairs. And in that narrative, what are the messages that really resonate with you, that you're like, please keep them going, and what's missing from the narrative? And one of my colleagues today said, I cannot thank you enough for being so honest about how hard it is. This is hard. And she said, as a result of it, it's allowing all of us now to have those same conversations with each other. That you're not just saying, buck up. You're not just saying, come on, get on with it. You are clearly saying, this is a struggle. So do what you can to take care of yourself. Give yourself a break. Give yourself grace. Give others grace. And that message, she said, has actually allowed me to even bring more to my work, because I know that I can just bring myself to work. And when I bring myself fully, so it goes back to that earlier conversation, right? So I think that if you allow people, my really good friend and colleague, Reverend Dr. Jamie Washington, used to always say, when you show up authentically, you give others permission to do the same.
Hmm.
And I believe that to be really true. And so I think that when I show up really honest about, I'm really struggling about the holidays, I want to be with my family and I don't know if I can. And everybody else is thinking the same darn thing. So you just open up an honest conversation, right?
Right.
And I think that in that honesty and in that authenticity and in that realness, people are able to actually engage their work in some different ways.
Mm, right. It's that humanizing piece.
It is. It really is.
So everyone in the book was asked the same question that was featured at the end, and that is, what is your why for leading online? That's very common. Like, what is your why? I didn't steal that from Simon, but that's a book that one could, but to actually take that into application in digital spaces is really the flashlight that I try to provide folks in the book. And maybe that's where all these dots came from, like way deep down, is trying to connect the dots and for you to find kind of your North Star. So then when you are having questions about what platforms do I be on, what do I post today? And so your answer was, I lead online to stay connected to and engaged with my students, colleagues, friends, and communities. So we've shared a few different examples, but if you wouldn't mind, as we round out today, how do you bring some of this to life on digital platforms, especially with the transition the last year and in COVID? What are maybe some things that really are bringing that why to life for you in order to connect?
It's so interesting. I forgot that I said that, and I thought you were just going to ask me right now, and I would have said the same thing. So it's
Oh.
really interesting. Right? There's a congruency, which I'm really glad about. I think it's about, one of my strengths is connection, and so I think it's about connection. I think it's about community, and I think it's about care. I think that that's the reason, why I do that. And so it's interesting. When I first started to step more into social media, and I still have miles to go and promises to keep for myself, mostly just because I really want to use the medium in ways to elevate care, community, and connection. Right. So it's just another way I want to step into my leadership. So I've got some work to do there. When I first started, I kind of thought about Facebook was a way that when I first started was a way for me to stay connected, mostly to my nieces and nephews, right? I just wanted to know more about their friends and their life, what was going on. And then they, like many of them, moved away from Facebook because too many of us got on Facebook. But I still use it as a place for me where I often will talk a fair amount about my family. It's a way where I talk about my nieces and nephews who are the loves of my life and their achievements and accomplishments and what they're doing. They're getting married or having children or whatever it might be. I still use it for that. And I will use it also in some ways to talk about community at work. So I talk about kind of familial community and work community. I often use Twitter as a way to open up a conversation or as a way to broadcast something that's happening. So it's a way to bring people together. Like, hey, did you know that a town hall is happening Thursday night with students? Join us. Or so I use Twitter as a way really to connect to my University of Maryland community specifically, and also to parents and families and to alum. But it feels very University of Maryland specific. My Twitter does, and my Instagram is actually where I think more of my students spend some time. Right. So I think that's where a lot of students. LinkedIn is where I want to spend more time, and I will in time. But Instagram, and I think that Instagram, what I feel, that's just my framing. I feel like Instagram, the photo is the narrative, the picture is the story. In Facebook, it feels sometimes more of the text is not as much as the photo, And so Instagram, it feels like the photo is central. So I often use my Instagram as a way to talk about community in terms of physical community. So lots of times I'll do pictures of the campus, the physical environment, right, as a way to bring the physical environment to students who aren't here, which I think is really, really important. Again, as always a way to create connections, for sure. So I use Instagram stories about the physical space community, but also the community of people that I work with. So sometimes it's about student leaders that I'm doing work with, or it's about my colleagues that I'm doing work with, or it's about a really cool thing that's happening on campus. And so I still think about those in that way. And so again, I think that for me, it's a way to allow for great accessibility for more people in my life and in my communities, connect to me personally, me professionally, and for me to connect to them too.
Mm-hmm. I think you've always done a really great job as a photographer or getting others to take your photo, because it brings so much of the story to life. And for you, like we all have personality and animations and things, but I feel like with you, like the emotions can just speak, and those that are around you, I think it like amplifies the impact that you have on the people around you or the moment that you're sharing. So I mean, I would encourage you to post photos all over the place because it's definitely an invitation for connection as well.
Hey, Josie, speaking of photos, look at this sunset. Can you see out the windows? Like it's beginning.
My goodness.
And soon it's going to be like really pink and just quite lovely. Isn't that neat?
You promised. And
Yeah.
well, we love some sunset photos on social media.
That is right. Yes, that is right.
We have talked about a variety of different topics that all center around community and connection and care. Is there anything else that is really speaking to you right now that you would love, especially leaders, to hear, if it's related to social media or just navigating times right now?
That's in terms of social media, I would say that it is important for us as leaders to step into that realm. And again, it's baby steps. Just begin, just explore, just step into it. And I would say find partners like Josie and others who can help you figure out what are your stumbling blocks, or What do you need to learn? Or, one of the things that happens when you work with Josie is that she gives you this great workbook and there's worksheets, and you can do it even when Josie is not there anymore, right? You have it with you to use as a tool. And so it's one of the things that I think about doing over my winter break, right? To just kind of delve into it a little bit more as a way to step into it a little bit more. And so when I think about social media, and I think that part of its power is it does help you tell your leadership story. It helps you shape the narrative of your division. It speaks to who you are and how you lead, and there's greater accessibility as a result of it. That the more and more and more you step into it and I step into it, it's not about the number of people following. It's about those, because I think that every person who follows, it creates a ripple effect, right? You bring one student in and then they tell their 5 or 6 friends, hey, did you know that we got this vice president who actually really cares about students? Like it just begins to shape a narrative, whatever it is that you want it to be, whether it's, your words, hope or care or lead or develop, whatever it is, whatever it is that you want it to be. But I would say that social media helps us do that. So I would say read Josie's book, and she didn't ask me to say that. I'm just telling you. Read the book. I mean, it's got great worksheets and great examples. Here's the deal. This is new learning for all of us. Let's be clear. Like our academic programs don't teach us this, right? But we have a colleague who knows our profession because she's a student affairs educator and is also an expert. So it's just a great resource. So I encourage you to get the book and read it and learn, or work with her one-on-one, or bring her into your team. Like that's the other thing that you can do, which I think is really great. And again, Josie has no idea I'm saying any of this. Ask me to do any of this. I want you to know that.
Oh, that is so kind of you, Patti. And my other reflection was something that you had shared as an example. Some of the work that we do within digital leadership might not be public. Your examples of sending out videos and what I'm sure is really meaningful emails or newsletters to your humans, whoever they are, is also a form of leadership. And the ways that you would show up on Twitter, you can use these tools in those spaces as well as in direct messages, or how you conduct a Zoom meeting with student leaders. I definitely don't want people to think it's only this, it's only Twitter, it's only Instagram. Like really, it's a bit of life right now. But your endorsement is so very, very meaningful to me, Patti. I very much appreciate it. It was such a joy to coach you and see your transition home to University of Maryland, and to be able to feature you in the book and to get a talk today. Well, that's just going to carry me through the rest of the week.
Right back at you, good woman. It's always great to be in conversation with you. You're a light. You are an absolute light in the world. And I love the fact that you want to make a difference in this way. And I just want you to know you're making a difference in this way. So I jumped at the chance just to be in a conversation with you. So thank you very much.
I appreciate that. Well, I want to keep you on just so I can watch that sunset. But I will let you go for now. Thank you so very much, Patti.
Take care, Josie.
Okay, well, as promised, heart-filled, care-fueled, and I hope you were able to take some tidbits that you can implement immediately, or at least that spirit is lifted a little bit higher. Find Patti on Twitter, on LinkedIn, on Instagram. And if you do happen to know her, she's also on Facebook. You can find her there, which is where I found that housekeeping post. And I swear I did not pay her at all to give me some props about my coaching. But one little promotion is I just put out a new course, which basically takes the book and the coaching program I have to be a self-paced course that you can quickly, but also on your own realistic time, learn social media, but also go through some tactical discernment to figure out a strategy that can actually work for you and connect you with your people. So it's called the Connected Exec course. You can head to my website, josiealquist.com, to find more. Okay, well, that is going to wrap for today. We will be taking next week off to celebrate, at least in the U.S., the Thanksgiving holiday. And then I will be coming back to you in December. Yes, December always comes so quickly. Bringing on my next guest, which is Latanya Reese-Miles. She's the executive director of the first year experience at UCLA. And we're going to talk about building digital communities. She's got a whole lot that she's been doing for first generation students and professionals. So, y'all, thanks so much for watching or catching the replay. Please be well. I'm so thankful for you.